This is Mount Apo Street, Davao City. So we're going to vlog here, looking for the appropriate spot for our vlog. 6th, 7th floor. Okay, so here. So we're going to vlog here. So good morning everyone, my name is Arnel Madraso. I'm the teacher and vlogger. So this is the continuation of our vlog review. This is a book review by F.H. Batacan, Smaller and Smaller Circles. So this is the book that we are critiquing. And so with me is my vlog rehearsal notes. So it's really essential for us to have notes so that we will be following a certain order so that the review will be comprehensive. Okay, so it's kind of hot here, but this is a perfect location given that our background is in fact the Mount Apo view. This is a street. This is Davao City. This is my first time to vlog in a hotel in this city. So this is the staircase, the spiral staircase of the Green Windows dormitory. So let me continue now with the assumption that I made. That in reading, this is my first novel written by a Filipino. The assumption is that for a bilingual writer like Batacan, a Filipino-English bilingual, it's possible that in her novel, there might be occurrence of features of Philippine English, given that the context is a poor environment, like in Payatas, dealing with, for example, people. So think about the challenge of creating characters and whose voice are living in a place where it's full of poverty. And so what would be the expressions of people given that they will be speaking in English, right? So remember that English language is spoken by wealthy people, for example, in the United States. Okay, so what we will do here now is provide evidence. So for that assumption, so I found certain evidence, page 64 of Batacan's novel. In the case, in that case where she mentioned about isang kahit, isang tuka. So that's a feature, an expression in the Philippines. For a Filipino hearing that expression, you would know that isang kahit, isang tuka refers to poor people, correct? Now, she attempted to translate this into one scratch, one peck. So one scratch, one peck for an American wouldn't really understand what it means, even for a Filipino. But if you say isang kahit, isang tuka, that really is in fact referring to people who are poor. And there are also an attempt to translate it into hand to mouth. So hand to mouth would be referring it to sign language, to oral language. So it's not referring to poor people. So this is one feature, an evidence to my assumption. Another is page 32, Barong Tagalog. Barong Tagalog is in fact a formal dress. So this is an attempt to use borrowed term, Barong Tagalog. And then expressions like no, as in ano, referring to right, no, as an expression, as a tag expression. Or hay naku. So hay naku is found in page 197, or even I found in certain pages here like leche. Leche is an expression when someone is angry, right? So swear word like leche, no? So leche is a Spanish word, but then it means if it's an expression of exasperation or an expression of anger in the Philippines. So these are the pieces of evidence that I'm presenting to prove my point. Next is, the novel is divided into chapters. So started from chapter 1 and it ends in chapter 52. Then it begins with a prologue. Okay. Then it ends with an epilogue. Okay. Now, something that is new, as I said in the preliminaries, I said that how would we compare her to other other novelists like John Grisham or Stephen King, one distinct style is, of course, the presence of Philippine English, and the second that I saw in her is that she has this way of, in terms of building up suspense. So starting in chapter 11, there's a page before the chapter begins where she would reveal the killer's thoughts, no? The killer's reflective thinking, or she's trying to make the connection between the reader and the killer, because this is serial killer type of novel. So she would want the reader to know what is in the mind of the killer. So that would build up the suspense part. And it helps a lot bring about a good plot development. So that's the metacognitive thinking or reflective thinking of the killer. No? Whether that the reader would know what's his state of mind during that moment before the chapter would begin. Okay, so then okay, so now let's proceed to the character of Father San. So as I mentioned a while ago, he is a priest, but I'm looking into the connection here between science and religion, because remember that they are priests and yet they are scientists. So there seems to be the interface of their beliefs in terms of their religion and as well as science. But what is interesting here is that it's quite consistent when it comes to the belief system of Father Sanz, because though he is a priest, he bases his judgment according to evidence. No, according to evidence, being a scientist. And so his work as a scientist is, in fact, trying to look for evidence and prove the innocence or guilt of a certain person. So in this case, there has been complaints about priests who are molesting children. And so he started following this case and listened to complaints. And in fact, he is seeking for justice for priests who are sexually abusing children. And so he is really critical and vocal about these sexual abuses from the priests. So somehow, in reading this novel, in the beginning, I was thinking that maybe the killer of this serial crime could be a member of the church, because that is somehow the tone, right? So it's like, the tone is like, it's building up a case against a church. Not the church as a whole, but certain individuals who are committing alleged crimes, so like sexually abusing young children, and so, or minors. So that's the initial part. But then the conflict now is the church somehow, with the presence or existence of Cardinal Meneses in this novel, Cardinal Meneses would want Father Sanz to leave his priest alone and not to follow them and try to seek for justice. He would want Father Sanz to drop the case because there's no truth to it. So you can see that the church is somehow defending the priests. They are being just transferred, no? They are just being transferred from one location to the other, but never filed cases or never corrected this act, no? But then just merely transferred from one place to the other. So Father Sanz was thinking, if in fact these complaints are true, then you wouldn't really look into the correction of the act. So you need to correct by filing case. Because if you will not correct this criminal act, then this will still happen in the future, even if you will transfer the priest from one place to the other. So there's certain conflict there, no? But then still you can see that Father Sanz is a scientist and he would base his judgment according to science, since his work is forensic anthropology. So that's one point, no? According to science and religion. But still, you can see the presence of spirituality in both of the priests. So really the mission to help the poor helps seeking justice for the poor is in fact highly spirituality. For me, highly spiritual persons like them would do everything in their power to help the poor. And in fact, that is a true spirituality rather than showing people that you are religious but then you are not really helping the poor. But in fact, some of these priests are actually sexually abusing children, right? So for me, I sense the dedication and commitment of these two priests to help the poor. And that speaks of their spirituality. Okay, so next is, in the case of Father Jerome, there are parts in this novel that would, there's a flashback technique when he was a student of Father San. So there's the connection, establishing the connection between the two of how they became very good friends, no? In the novel, I observed that it's more of this is really family-oriented, no? As a reflection of our culture of being family-oriented. In terms of description, there's vivid description of how close they are with their families, no? With their friends. So there's vivid description of the relationship in the family. And in this way, there's description of family, there's description of the society also during that time. So since this is flashback technique, so this novel happened in 1997, but then there's flashback technique towards the 1970s during the time when he was still a student. And so there's a description of the political system and the problem that may have brought about by the dictatorship or the martial law. So somehow, this writer is projecting an image of corruption and dictatorship during the 1970s, no? During this time. And I think reflective of the author's concern about the political system during that time. Now, in terms of the present government, so since they are working, the two priests are working within the realm of NBI, National Bureau of Investigation, the author would constantly remind of the government's failure to provide enough funds for investigation. Even the description of the rooms, the description of facilities would always be low standard, you know, in terms of prioritizing equipment for investigation is really projected at a negative light. Right? So you can see that in terms of governance, there's really that projection of negative management, especially in the acquisition of facilities for good and expected high performance in terms of investigation, especially the laboratory. In fact, Father Sanz is being able to go on with the operation of investigation through grants, no? Grants from abroad and not necessarily from the government. Okay, so that is Father Lucero's background, and then so the novel revolves around the serial killings of children in Payata. So there were 7 victims in this novel, and so basically the story revolves around the investigation, no, of the death of these children. It's in fact serial because there is some sort of a pattern, no? So upon their investigation, the two priests, they found that somehow this happens every first Saturday of the month. So first Saturday of the month, so that is their lead. So in their work, in their forensic anthropology field, they are able to detect the period of the time when the event occurred, the killing, with the period of the cadavers being decaying at the decaying stage. So they would be getting samples, and perhaps they would be looking into the body parts, dentures and all. skin types and all, then they can they can determine when the killing happened. So in that case, we were able to follow this assumption that it was first Saturday of the month at the time of its killing. So the first victim was Ryan Molina, and that was the first instance where they were thinking, okay, so we will have to really push this through because this is really a case of serial killer. But then, you know, the system, the police departments are not really into this. No, in the Philippines, if there's killing, then maybe it's just one of the random killings that is happening, and it's not really their concern to really think that it's serial killings. Only in Western countries would really follow this type of killings. In the Philippines, it's like we are still on a traditional framework of solving crimes, no? And that it's not really possible in the Philippines. So that is the battle between the priest and the police department and even NBI. So the NBI, some of the people there are antagonists. So like Ben Arcinas. Ben Arcinas was one of those senior attorneys working in NBI, and was acting like an antagonist because he wasn't really wanting to support Father Sanz and Father Jerome.